Hello. Hola, hola a todos y todas. Bienvenidos, bienvenidas. Qué rico tenerlos aquí. Caritas conocidas, como siempre, que es una delicia ver, y de las desconocidas empezar a ver también es una maravilla. Para los que no me conocen mucho, mi nombre es Gloria y yo estoy aquí en el equipo de INGLES Latam también acompañándolos feliz. Hoy tenemos una súper conferencia con Bob. Denme un segundo, me hace falta hacer una cosita pequeña aquí. Listo. Tenemos una preciosa conferencia con Bob, pero antes de contarles de qué se trata la conferencia, quiero contarles un poquito la parte logística. Para los que están aquí por primera vez, recuerden que en la parte de abajo de sus controles de Zoom aparece un pequeño mundito que dice interpretación y allí ustedes van a poder escoger si quieren escuchar la conferencia en inglés o si quieren escuchar la conferencia en español. Incluso pueden cambiarlo cada vez que quieran hacerlo. Entonces, si tienen alguna duda de cómo hacerlo, me cuentan, pero es simplemente cambiar y escoger el idioma en el que prefieren escuchar. Hay algo que siempre nos van a escuchar decir y es, por favor, prendan sus cámaras. Vamos a hablar de liderazgo, como dice Bob, y una de las primeras movidas de los líderes es aparecer. Entonces les vamos a pedir que todos los que puedan prender su cámara lo hagan. Y yo siempre digo, están exentos los que están conduciendo, por favor, los que están conduciendo, solamente escúchennos, pero todos los demás aparezcan, no importa si hay niños atrás jugando, si hay gatos pasando por delante, esposos que están trabajando al lado o esposas que están trabajando al lado. Son bienvenidos todos en este espacio, pero para nosotros es mucho más rico ver sus caras, así vengan con más gente. Entonces, bienvenidos todos los que estén en casa con ustedes para poder tenerlos con nosotros.
Please wear clothes.
Bueno, no me... Ya. Entonces, para no quitarle mucho tiempo a Bob realmente, porque es a quien vienen a escuchar, quiero dejarlos con un tema que a mí personalmente me parece divino. Y él nos va a hablar de cómo la sabiduría ancestral puede ayudarnos a ver de una manera diferente nuestra manera de generar futuro y de nuestra manera de relacionarnos con otros. Entonces, los dejo con Bob. Si tienen algún tema, alguna pregunta en la logística o lo que sea, escríbanme por el interno y disfruten muchísimo este espacio. Bob, como siempre, todos tuyos y...
Fantastic. Everybody, give me high tens. I want to make sure we're connected, we're alive. Thank you. Thank you. We're going to do an exploration tonight in a very important topic for leadership. And you know, there's something important about leadership. Leadership is not about simply results in the world. It's also about your life. And this is one of the problems with leadership today. It gets separated, like you can become this mechanical source of activity and perhaps lead a company. But in our generative tradition, we have learned we need to connect this with your life. This is an important part of life: work, leadership, and life. So we're talking about all of these things. So we're going to do an exploration tonight. I'm very pleased to be here. I feel honored to be in these conversations once a month, to speak to you as the founder of the Institute for Generative Leadership. I've been on this journey for 41 years now. And the world is calling for new leadership. The world is in breakdown in so many ways. And the way we begin to change the world is we change what's happening around each of us individually. And then we learn to come together with others, to be teams, to affect organizations, because organizations are the form of action and power in the world that makes the impact. And so we have learned in our journey that there are 3 dimensions to the leadership journey, and they are also dimensions of the life journey. And sometimes we forget that. Sometimes we get stuck in one dimension. We call these dimensions me, we, and world. Sometimes you go to organizations and people are talking about the numbers, the projects. That's a world conversation. But sometimes they forget that in order to get the numbers, it's a side effect of the coordination of groups of people. So we have to go to the we space. And many leaders, many organizations, many teams have blind spots, and they struggle with the coordination of action. And we also found that in the leadership journey, and leadership not only of individuals, but of teams, that in order to connect our commitment to a result in the world with our ability to coordinate with others, we have to go inside of ourselves. We have to become aware of how we see the world, how we move in the world, and what are the skills to be a human being that holds a possible future and can guide others to coordinate action to create that future. That is the role of leadership in our interpretation. And it's an area of skills and blindnesses as well. What does skill look like? When you have a chef who goes to the kitchen and is highly excellent at being a chef, they see the world in a certain way and they have certain skills in action. And the results they produce are high quality cuisine. If you look at any field, a physician, for example, how can they fulfill the role of a physician? They see the world a particular way, and they have particular skills to take particular actions of healing and health. And so we see here that this theme of being an observer and actor shows up again and again. The question that we're exploring tonight and in generative leadership is, what is the observer and actor of an effective leader? And we're adding to that this concern for not making leadership a bunch of techniques to sacrifice yourself to, but as part of your own life journey. So with that, I have a question for you. Are you interested? Okay. Let's explore together. So I have before we go, I have a very difficult leadership test for you. We'll see if you can pass the test, if you're leadership material or not. It's a very tough test. It's called taking a deep breath. Can you take a deep breath right now, please? Take a deep breath. And relax on the exhale. It is amazing how important this is, not only in leadership, but in life. When we face challenges, we get tense. When we're uncertain, we worry. When we get triggered, we can go to our head or an emotion. And the way to bring ourselves back to the moment, to be present and open, is to take a deep breath and open on the exhale. And this is crucial for learning. So I may actually invite you, as we do our exploration tonight, to take a deep breath, to get out of your head, to just feel the moment, let go of whatever chatter is going on, and stay present. So take a deep breath, please, right now. Let's open and get ready. for possibility. So I want to share, I just finished a book published just recently in the US. It's a lovely title. It's called Hearts Touched with Fire. It's written by David Gergen, who's a famous guy in the US. He's on the Harvard faculty, he's on TV. He wrote a book about leadership. Fascinating. And he mentions in the book talking to other thinkers at Harvard, you know, one of the top universities in the US, about leadership. But the part that really struck me in his book, he says, oh, there's about 200 models, 200 interpretations of what leadership is. And no one has the real answer. Amazing. Amazing that the question of leadership is still so difficult for us as a culture. And in this conversation of all these points of view, we at the Institute believe we have something important to say. Do we have the only answer? No. Do we have the final answer? No. But do we have an effective answer, a powerful answer? Yes. And we have demonstrated that over the last 4 decades. But tonight, I want our theme to be wisdom. I mentioned blind spots, that we live with blind spots. A blind spot is where you're not aware of something and you don't know that you're not aware. It just doesn't exist for you. You don't see certain things. And this is not a deficiency. This is normal. 99.9999% of what's going on around us, we're blind to. And so this choice to take a path of learning, to illuminate the world, to see with new eyes, is an important choice. And we have been in this question of how do we reveal the world to the eyes of a leader, the actions of a leader, so that we can better create futures and a world that we care about. Our vision, our commitment in the Institute is everything we do is oriented to leaders that will create a world in which everyone thrives. We have certainly, as human beings, created a world in which that is not the case. And if we're so powerful at creation, then let's use that to create a better world. But to do that, we have to do our work. We have to do our learning. We have to go from world to we to me, and then back again, from me to we to world. And that's the invitation of generative leadership. But let's explore wisdom tonight. It's one of the blind spots. I'm currently writing a book called The 7 Blind Spots of Leadership. And wisdom is a hot candidate right now to be number 8. So you're getting the latest scoop here in our creative work. But let me share with you, I have some images to help here. And yeah, that's the one. Okay. Can everybody see that okay? Yeah, we good? Fantastic. So I opened this conversation about ancient wisdom, but ancient wisdom is not the point. We're exploring it to say, how can it be wisdom for today? Because much wisdom of our cultural histories has been lost that would serve us well to be better leaders, to have a better world today. And so at the Institute, we hold that leadership and coaching leaders are professions. We believe that the work we have done over the last 4 decades, combined with others, is enough to set professional standards for leadership. And why is this important? Most leaders have worked in companies, been promoted because they were a good performer, and never had the chance to learn the professional standards of leadership. That's why I believe the learning we do at the Institute is so important for the world. And the role of leaders who learn these skills and the role of coaches who coach leaders allow us to take leadership and its impact in the world to a new level. And as I said, the journey of leadership is also the journey of life. As human beings, we always experience going from here to there. When I have conversations with people, this is always the case. They have some story about where they are here and where they're going there. And sometimes the story is not clear. Sometimes the story doesn't have power. And so to begin our exploration tonight, I'm going to ask you the question, where are you on your life journey? Where are you in your leadership journey? Where are you in your coaching journey? Where is here? You see, if we have effective eyes to see our here, it opens up our possibilities for our journey. But if we're not clear about our here, we may just be collapsed into working hard and hoping. And where is there? Where are you going? Where are you going in your life? Where are you going with your career? Where are you going in your leadership? What's the contribution you want to make? And these are important questions we found that most people have not spent the time to explore. And the default is we come to learning like, give me some new tips and techniques. No, we're here to talk about the life journey, the leadership journey, and creating a better world where we go. And so when we're on this journey, we're always doing it with and for others. And when people show up in the leadership journey, the theme is usually, I want to be able to take on bigger responsibility, have a bigger impact. But as I said, we have this problem that leadership has a blind spot. We don't even know what it is. All the experts are giving us a menu of 200 choices. And so if there's blindness in our generative journey, we're saying we need new eyes. Instead of being blind, we want to see. What do we need to see to be effective in the world as leaders, as coaches, as people living a good, meaningful life? And so we have come to terminology where we talk about human being, every human being, you and I, we are observers. What do we observe? We observe our world. But we don't see the same world. You see, what you see is based on the structure you have as an observer. It's not, you don't see the world. The world doesn't determine what you see. You do. And when you look at what you're aware of, some people are aware of some things and others are not. Some people pay attention to certain things and seem to have a powerful impact from that. Others are not. Some chefs are good, some chefs are terrible. And so this takes us to the me space, that if I want to work with action, with others, impact in the world, meaning, I need to pay attention. What kind of observer am I and where are my blind spots? The observer we are shapes our menu of actions. But actions are not simply things we know and do. Actions are part of our embodied skill. We don't take action because we have a new concept. This is part of the problem with learning leadership. A lot of people are put into leadership development programs and they're given new models and frameworks and concepts, but it doesn't change their actions because there's more to action than simply a concept. But what we can say is the observer and actor we are, the actions we take, it produces our results. And so we want to pay attention. And as I said, the fact that you have new eyes does not mean you can take new action because you have to change the actor you are. I'll give you a simple example. We find many people in their life journey, in their leadership journey, have developed a success strategy of working hard and doing a lot. And in the domain of coordination, when they're asked to do something, they always say yes. And they often have negative consequences from always saying yes. They're often exhausted, overcommitted, and having problems fulfilling. And so we say, oh, that's because you haven't learned how to say no. When you have more demand than you can fulfill, you need to say no and have an appropriate conversation. Clear concept. And you know what? We found that just knowing that they should say no doesn't mean they can, because there's a whole emotional embodied learning for that. That's a simple example that recurs over and over again. We go to what we call the edge of our competence, the edge of our practices, the edge of our skills, and the edge is where we stop, unless we learn how to go beyond the edge. And that's what learning is, to go beyond the old edges, to expand the territory of our abilities. And so in generative leadership, in our journey of asking this question of what is leadership and what do human beings do, we have been able to develop some new observers. These observers are ways to see the world and to pay attention to the world that guides action in a new way that is different than the common sense. And so one of our, this is interesting. Have you ever lost a cursor on your computer? I'm looking around here. Okay, we're going to do it this way. Well, hang on. Aren't computers wonderful? They give us a chance to practice breakdowns. So for some reason, I am.
Try with enter, Bob.
What's that?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, my computer was acting up. Okay, let's see if everybody take a deep breath. It's good for these moments too, to come back, recenter. I apologize on behalf of my computer and perhaps my fingers. So we have learned that in order to dispel a blind spot of our culture, where people are taught to think in concepts and interact around concepts and view communication as the transfer of information, this acronym of self, which does refer to yourself, identifies the dimensions. And many people are blind to some of these dimensions and how they fit together. One is the letter S stands for somatics. Somatics and body. The word somatics means body and mind together. When the mind changes, the body changes with it. When the body changes, the mind changes. They go together. We also have found that emotions are the part of every moment of our experience. They're the part of how we see, how we act, but also the part of how we show up to others. Actions. You don't have actions without bodies, and there's always an emotional context. And so emotions and moods are a huge part of awareness of not just the state I'm in, but how are we doing with action and results? L stands for language and stories. This is where the generative leadership journey started. I was a student and then a staff member with Dr. Fernando Flores in the 1980s. I worked in his companies for 7 years. This is where I learned my fundamentals in this discipline. And we started with what is the language of action? What is it that produces action in language? And over the years, we've learned that whatever we see and do is always couched in a story. And some of our stories are supportive and positive, and some of our stories get in the way. The P stands for practice. What you practice creates the observer and actor you are. Who you are today as a leader, as a human being, has come from your lifetime of practice. You are what you have practiced in many dimensions. Who you become depends on what you practice going forward. You are not trapped in your past. And a big part of our generative leadership journey is entering new practices to empower ourselves to create the future in a more effective way. When we change our practices, we change our future. We can change our history. And when we're effective in leadership, we do that with others. H stands for history. We can't understand ourselves or our community or our culture without understanding its history, because it created us. And the profound commitment of leadership in its highest form is to be history makers, to not simply be trapped in creating a future that's only a repetition of the past. And so this dimension that we call self is a skill of listening. It shows up in conversations. It's not just a theory, it's not just a model. It's very real. You experience it. You, in this conversation right now, are experiencing from the SELPH that you are. And you are listening to me in the way that you observe and experiencing the SELPH that I am, my presence, my emotional tone, my stories, and its landing. This is where our future and our world live, in our conversations. This is another key distinction from our generative leadership journey. When we look at conversations, this model is something we learned about language. This is where we began 40 years ago. This is a structure called the conversation for action. This, however, is not just a model. It is a diagram of relationships that are going on in reality. So when a physician is going to treat a patient, they have learned anatomy. They have become an observer of anatomy that helps them make assessments and take actions to fulfill their promise to heal and preserve health. This is the observer of the leader. This is a structure in conversation, how people create the future from agreements. They create action by clarifying. what they're going to agree to, and that creates a structure of coordination. This structure is not discretionary. This is going on if you're paying attention or not. That's why we have found this is crucial, but it's not a model. These are actions. One of the ways, as we have learned to speak about the experience of leadership over the years, is we point out to people, it is a full body contact sport. You see each other, you interact with each other, you have conversations, but conversations are not about information, they're a full body experience. And so I'm not going to go into detail here, except to acknowledge that this is something we explore deeply as a personal skill set, as a way to observe ourselves. And I found it when I began my journey in 1981, it transformed my world. I began to have different conversations. And I was in Silicon Valley in the US, working for an organization that was in a death spiral. They were not able to get products out the door. And they made me a program manager to coordinate the organizations that had been failing to produce. And this conversational perspective enabled me to have conversations, to make agreements that shaped actions. And we were able to have a breakthrough in 6 months, where all products went out the door with 10 times higher quality than had ever been achieved before. That's what put me on this path. This stuff works. But if this is the how of action, if this is the how of leadership, I have a question for us. What conversation is worth having? What result is worth committing to? That is a question not answered by developing skill in the practice of coordination. That's a question that requires wisdom. And so this focus we have on wisdom and generative leadership, we have the questions, what wisdom do we have to be an observer and actor? How does this help us with our life and work? How do we see wisdom informing leadership and our coaching of leaders? So we're looking for wisdom, not just techniques for action. So what wisdom do we choose? What observer are we going to explore here? And tonight I'm sharing with you a project that I've been working on for about 20 years. And it's the ancient wisdom of China. How can that help us? How does it bring a new perspective and give us new skills in leadership and coaching? And I'm going to guide us in answering those questions, but you have to take a deep breath first. And be open, because we're going to come with a perspective to see with new eyes and see what new actions it will open for us. So here is that structure that I showed you before of the conversation for action. And notice that it has a path, it has a flow, it has a sequence. This was something that I was working on and getting powerful results in the 1980s and 90s. And I began the Institute in 1993. But I saw that this was powerful, but it didn't answer all the questions. It showed the steps of coordination, But how do we get to the alignment in the conversation? Sometimes it seemed complicated. How you deal with distrust? How do you deal with bad mood? How do you deal with really understanding someone when it seems to be difficult? And so in being a leader and a coach, I appreciated the power of a structure of coordination and action, but I also had experienced those moments of complexity where how do we have the conversation and how do we get on the same page was challenging. And that was a moment in the late 1990s. I saw a picture like this. This is a diagram from the 5-element tradition of Chinese medicine. And I looked at this diagram and said, it's not so simple as the conversation for action. It's got more complexity to it. It's showing how things interact. And I said, this may be the way that I can deal with the challenges of the complexities of listening, the complexities of conversation. This seems to have a lot more richness. And so I began to explore. And what showed up was a new way of observing and acting in the world, a new wisdom. And so I was curious, and I've been exploring with many learning events and books and having to go through different kinds of language and different speakers. And what I learned was that this ancient wisdom is not obsolete. It's not primitive. In many cases, it's what's missing today. It's part of our blind spot. When I was young, education was spoken about with a high regard for studying history, to learn from history. I don't hear that theme so much anymore, but I've learned to appreciate it even more. And so what does this perspective give us? Ancient wisdom can give us new illumination, new ways to see our world, new choices, new actions. And so what I found, here's a diagram. Maybe you've seen something like this. This is an acupuncture diagram. And it looks very complicated. There's a lot there. But this is a view of a human body, not only of the body, but of the energy. And not only of the energy, but of the health. And as you go into this new tradition, this new ancient tradition, we began to discover that the lessons that were mapped on the body were also steps of development. We're also part of a story of a life journey. And so I want to share that with you today. And so I found in that tradition, it was called the 5-element tradition, meridians, rivers of energy flowing through your body that are determining your health, your experience, what you see and what you do. Each of these rivers, this was a breakthrough for me when I asked an acupuncture master, I said, what is a meridian? And she said, it's a developmental path. And that led me, I want to learn more. If that's because we're in this here to there journey. And so I found that there were acupuncture point stories, physical symptoms, emotions, spirit, connection to the whole. But what I am going to highlight that I think is most accessible for us in our concern for leadership, coaching, and living a meaningful life is the stories of wisdom, because every point here is a new story. Stories of life, stories of leadership, stories of wisdom. So, for example, let's take a look at our here to there journey, which we all experience. What are the questions? How do we do here to there? What would help us to have a more powerful design or a more powerful, valuable experience in our life journey and our leadership journey? And so if we're going from here to there, we're also on a journey into the future. That's an interesting perspective. We're also on a journey into the world. And it brings us the question of, how do we take action? How do you walk your journey? How do you walk your life journey? Using that metaphor, because that walk is often conversations. What's your posture? What's your presence? Important topic for leaders. What's your energy? What's your readiness to move forward into the future? And so this new tradition began thousands of years ago. Some say as much as 5,000 years ago. There's texts that have been written 4,500 years ago, and they would draw from nature. They observed the realities of nature. And one of the functions of our life journey is growth and extension. Are you growing or not? And they use a name from nature to name this function. They called it wood. What does wood teach us? What does this metaphor of wood teach us? Well, wood's alive and it grows. But if you're going to have healthy wood, you have to have healthy roots. You have to be rooted in a place that has enough nutrition and water and sunlight for you to grow. What is your environment? Where are your roots? Are you in a healthy environment? And are you growing? And where do you grow? Where do you grow to? You grow toward the light. What is your light? And what I've found in our culture, many people don't know where their light is. And they are doing the best they can to say, help me develop new skills. I'll do better. But for the sake of what? And so part of this perspective called wood is that there is an energy, a river of energy in your body that is associated with how you are oriented to the future. The Chinese gave this a code word. They named it from their nature and body perspective. They called this liver. But we're not talking about the organ liver. Liver is a code word for the capacity to extend, the capacity to move forward, the capacity to go into life and the world, and to do it with health or without. And this river shows up from this ancient wisdom. It has steps of the developmental path. It starts all the way down on the big toe of your foot, goes up your leg, goes past your hips, and it ends close to your heart on your chest. So this river, this story of how you move into the future. And we can observe that from the point of view of leadership or coaching or life. This story says what's going on in your heart has something to do with what you do with your feet. What's going on in your heart has something to do with how you walk, how you travel. And so I began to be satisfied that this tradition had wisdom, that it was asking questions of us that we don't tend to live with. And so in this journey, let's begin to look at the steps of the journey from the eyes of this tradition. And the name of that first step in this developmental path, in this path of life and journey, is named by two Chinese characters. So the first character is Da, and I'm not here to teach you about Chinese characters. I'm here to develop a new observer from the stories of the character. So let me share the story of this character. This character is drawn representing a mature man. That little blip at the top has to do with the length of hair, because the more mature a man was in that early tradition, that was considered a sign of maturity. But you see, this figure has two legs spread in a very powerful way to be grounded. It has to do with how you stand in life, how you stand in your body. And that swoosh up to the head is strong and clear and straight. I associate that with your spine, with your presence. How do you feel in your body? Where do you stand? What do you stand for? And so, beginning to look from this perspective and the wisdom that this is the important first step is about how do you stand in life. The second character, Dun, is a very, very interesting story about this character. The scholars have gone back and studied what were the images that underlie this character that were first drawn. And this character is said to represent the image of a lamb being beaten without crying. Lambs were used for sacrifice. Lambs represented purity. And so what does this tell us about our life journey, starting our life journey? This story is that life is going to beat on you. Where you think you're doing the right thing, where you're pure, where you're innocent, where you're virtuous, life is still going to beat on you. And this aspect of life gives you a choice. Is your life going to be about reacting to the beating, making a drama about it, carrying around the story of how tough life is? Or are you going to go to the first character and say, I have power, I know where I stand, I can move? And the name for this point is called great estimation, the power of choice, or the important force. And one way to think about this point from one of the masters that I've, is that this point is saying you always have choice, even when life is beating on you. The universe is going to do what it does, and you always have choice about how you're going to deal with it. And so we have power rather than being a victim of life. And so this happens to be the point on the inside of your big toe. And that has meaning too, because it's asking the question, what's your stand? How is the way you're rooted in where you stand and what you stand for affecting your presence? Where are you pointed? If you're going to go somewhere and your big toe isn't pointed that direction, sounds like you're going to have a problem. At some point, you're going to have to change direction. Are you pointed to the right direction of where you want to go? And it also has to do with when we take the first step, we're going to step off this part of our body. Is it ready to go? Do we have the courage to take that step? How are we doing? Are you seeing the relevance of the stories from this new perspective? Let me share with you the second step. This character is a representation of 2 feet, the left foot and the right foot. And so the wisdom that it's giving us is when you are on a journey, you're going to have to balance different commitments, different actions as part of the journey. It's not just one direction. You're going to have to walk with balance. Are you balancing health with your work? Are you balancing family and work? Are you balancing meaning? Are you able to walk to include what needs to be balanced? And are you doing it well? Or are you hopping around on one foot? The second character, very interesting character, shows a gateway, shows a doorway with 2 leaves. And the symbol in the middle is a symbol for moonlight. And moonlight is the illumination that's available to us in the darkness. The moonlight is a soft and gentle illumination, and it's often associated with the whisperings of your heart, with the whisperings of your soul. And very interesting that this journey on this meridian takes us to the heart. And so this image here is you're on a journey, you have to balance things as you go, and as you're taking your steps forward, you're passing doorways. And moonlight is inviting you to other possibilities as you are on your journey. Are you paying attention? Maybe you pay too much attention. Maybe you get distracted. You don't go where you say you want to go because you go to these other doorways. What doorways of learning are you opening? And so this is called walking the space in between. And its story, it's the second point, it's behind the toe. It's a location behind the toe, because if you're really going to take a step into life, you're going to have to step off that front part of your foot. The toe points you, but you're going to get your lift. And so this is about, are you balanced? And how do you include possibilities or not in your walking your journey? The third point is called Supreme Surge. Here, the first character again shows the sign for great, but that little added mark on the bottom says it's even more than great. This is the supreme. This is the max. And Chong refers to your energy, the sea of energy that exists inside you. And the challenge of this point is, are you really committed to your actions? Are you bringing your best? Are you focusing, or are you drifting? And this energy needs to be shaped. It needs to go down a course that's been laid out for us. If we haven't built the design of the water course, our water just goes off. And so the questions here are you focused? And this point is back on our foot over the arch. And the arch is what gives you your spring. It's where that full energy into your step forward is going to come from. And so this story is asking you about, how are you directing your energy? Are you focused? And if you're focused, is it taking care of something that's meaningful? This is the last point I'm going to share with you today, but I'm giving you this as an example of wisdom, of having questions to observe ourselves and our journey. And this point is called the center of our inner seal. The first character shows an arrow hitting the bullseye. It's going into the center. And are we focusing on what really matters as a leader, not only for our projects, for our team, but for ourselves? Are you really focused there? And when you do that, you also begin to raise new questions. You see that central mark divides the square into two pieces. You have more questions coming out of it. Feng is an image of a small hill with a sign on the top. And this sign is your seal, and it's the granting of authority. And this is referring to your inner authority. Are you hitting the center, the core of what really matters to you? Are you hitting the center, the core of what really matters to those you serve? These are the questions. And this has to do with, physically, it has to do with where are you grounded in your true purpose? Are you standing for your deepest care? And you see the point on the body again gives us more wisdom, because it's at the crook of the foot when you're going to walk forward, but that point is over your heel. And your biggest weight, your biggest presence, your biggest connection to the ground is on your heel. And so this ancient wisdom, when I first went through it, I said, my God, these steps and these questions are about my life journey. They're helping me reveal not only my life journey, but what is the coherence and vitality and impact of my leadership. And so these are the questions that this journey, this way of observing, is asking us. What's your orientation to the future, your presence, your choice, your power? Are you ready to step forward? Do you have balance? What do you do with possibilities along the way? What doors do you go into and with courage? What's your focus? What are you doing with the focus? And these questions apply to us as individuals. They can apply to assessing someone else as a coach. These can apply to a team. And the last question is, do we really care about what we're doing? Are we in a mood of sacrifice, obligation, or full ownership in this journey that we're living. A couple of more things here that I've learned on this wisdom journey. One is that even though we talked about it as steps and a developmental path, all these points are going on at the same time. They're not sequential. Number 4 is going on while number 1 is going on. And it's like playing tennis. If you want to improve and focus on your tennis game, you don't just look at one thing. Every action you take in playing tennis includes all your body and your feet and your hips and your eyes. Everything is being affected when you try to make an impact. The other part of this wisdom is that as you look at the steps, they're not separate. They're not only going on in parallel, but it's part of a bigger story, a bigger flow. And in this wisdom, there are other rivers of energy that interact with this one. And each one asks us new questions, reveals our world in a new way. And so we have an opportunity here as leaders and coaches to build new and powerful listening from these perspectives, new ways to observe in the conversations. And so that's my example that I wanted to share with you of asking the question, what is wisdom for leadership? Where do we find it? And to share with you my experience of this long exploration of the fascination I have with the wisdom of a tradition that's speaking to us from thousands of years ago. So I'm going to ask you for a moment here to take a deep breath. And I've been asking these questions that this new observer has brought to us. And so I'd like you to think about it. I want this conversation to be about you, not about the content that I'm bringing. It's always about you. And what is your orientation to the future? How are you doing at taking steps forward with courage and power? What is your relationship with possibilities? Or are we too busy to have any? How do you focus and follow through when you're in action that's still connected to your heart, to others, to the world? And how are you standing? Where's the power of your stand? Where are you? And where are you going? So with that, I'm open to have a chat, to take questions. Feel free to type into the chat any questions you have. And let's open a conversation here. Some of you are I see here, are current participants in our programs, and I'm happy to see you here. And this is new for you too, I know. It's the first time I've done this presentation. So I'm most interested in, how did it land for you? Is this, as it is for me, an exciting perspective to see how to combine my own development with my own embodiment, with my journey into the world? So anybody have a comment or question at this point? Or am I going to sit here all alone? Well, I've got to ask you, did you like it? Did you not like it? Was it? Yeah. Yeah, super. Gloria, please. Thank you.
Tenía mucha curiosidad de saber qué era todo lo que había detrás de lo que siempre nos comentabas en los procesos, en las conferencias sobre la sabiduría china. Y digamos que hay una gran parte que me hace mucho sentido. Sin embargo, hay mucho más que entrar a mirar porque siento que es un montón de información. Pero lo que más me gustó es darme cuenta que tenemos todo pues en el cuerpo, o sea, que en el cuerpo tengo la clave, ¿sí? Entonces, a mí me hizo mucho sentido eso,
Sí.
aunque no entiendo gran parte de lo que pusiste en términos de la profundidad que tiene, pero el ver el esqueleto con los puntos marcados fue como, ¡oh! ¡Oh! Y lo que más me gusta es que me regala puntos en donde poner mi atención, físicamente hablando, que es uno de mis desafíos de aprendizaje. Entonces, yo quedo con un montón de curiosidad de entrarle más y de poder realmente identificar cómo cada uno de estos pasos se siente en cada parte que mencionaste que ellos ubican. Entonces ahí creo que hay un gran espacio de descubrimiento, por lo menos para mí a nivel personal. Entonces, me gustó mucho. Necesito unas 3 o 4 más para acabar de entender todo lo demás. No sé si están de acuerdo conmigo, pero porque es rico. Creo que hay
Beautiful.
mucho más en el fondo. Me encantó.
Beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, one of the powers of this wisdom tradition is it connects so many things. So yes, it's connecting the body, but it's also revealing what the body is telling us about our reality. It's not just about the body. The point on the big toe is not about the big toe. It's about starting a journey. It's about where you're pointed. It's about what your relationship is with, and that occurs not just in the body, it occurs in our conversation, it occurs in our self-image, it occurs in how we are perceived by other people. And that's really the power I've found of this Chinese tradition. Even their words have meanings that can mean very different things. And the terminology is not about, okay, we're talking about this. It's more of a terminology. No, we're talking about writing. All the terms have this kind of quality to them. And I'm particularly interested because I find in English and in our Western culture, we have very limited vocabulary for experience. We're very inarticulate with feelings and experience and choices in our inner world that can inform also our outer action. And I'm finding this to be a rich place to be an observer of myself and my experience with a much richer vocabulary. Thank you. Yet, hi, can you hear me? Hi.
Sí, hola.
Hola.
Hola, Bob. Tú nos ayudas con la traducción,
Hi.
¿cierto?
Sí, habla tranquila
Hola.
en español, que vea te traduce.
¿Me escuchan? Sí, ok. Bueno, una de las experiencias o aprendizajes más importantes que he tenido yo como persona, como profesional y también acompañando a otros profesionales es justamente el reconocer o el vivir la incertidumbre, ¿no? La pandemia nos golpeó en la cara y tuvimos que flexibilizarnos, pero para mí en lo personal fue un proceso bastante retador, ¿no? Un desafío bastante importante porque es reconocer la incertidumbre, aceptar la incertidumbre, y ahí la pregunta para Bob es, ¿qué otras herramientas, desde lo que nos has presentado el día de hoy, podríamos absorber de repente para poder ser mejores observadores y poder tener mejores decisiones y mejores conductas o acciones Y para mantener este estado, ¿no? de la persona era lo que tú nos comentabas, ¿no? Cómo estar equilibrados,
Beautiful.
cómo avanzar desde nuestro centro, cómo tener esa postura firme hacia adelante, con la incertidumbre, cómo viajar de esta manera.
Yes. Beautiful. I love your questions. And these are the questions
A mí
that,
me encanta.
yes. Thank you. And these questions have been the questions of our journey in generative leadership for 40 years. How do we reinterpret action to be the action of human beings, not machines? To be in relationship with the world as a place of living and health, not as simply an economic machine. And I think this is the worthy part of our conversation. So, of course, we have much we can share in our learning offers, but also these conversations are where we can explore these questions. The kind of discourses that I've drawn from tonight, I shared from the Chinese wisdom. We draw from the work that foundations that we share with the Newfield Coaching School, for example, ontology, somatics, martial arts. We even go into poetry and the language of the heart. And I think the most important framing of all of these opportunities is that we learn with our questions. We don't learn with our answers. We learn with our questions. And the big questions have no final answer. The big questions, I call them existential questions. Who are you? Is there a right answer to that? No, you create it. Where are you going in your life? Is there a right answer to that? No, you create it. And why are you going there? Again, you create it. And what I've found in our culture is people have been so trained to be production machines, to get a job and perform, they don't have time with these questions. So my recommendation is give yourself time to live with these questions. And I also recommend that the questions are not about closing them with an answer. Every day, the question of who you are can reveal your possibilities. And that's what we call living at the edge of possibility. So hopefully that is something that you can actually take and do from this conversation. Thank you for your question. Juan Eduardo.
Hola, Bob.
Hola.
Me parece súper interesante ver y asombroso ver cómo la vida va conectando tantas cosas.
Sí.
Alguien que yo, de hecho mi ex mujer sufría severas jaquecas. Y un amigo mío, una vez comentando esto, él peleaba artes marciales. Y me dijo, aprieta, cuando le duela, apriétala acá y aprieta en el dedo gordo del pie, acá, pero en el pie. Y es maravilloso ver cómo están conectadas las cosas, cómo ciertas maneras de ver la vida se conectan con tu cuerpo. Miraba y decía, qué increíble, como yo hice cuerpo en movimiento en Newfield, y ahí nos enseñaban una serie de movimientos, una serie de ejercicios físicos, y ver cómo esto se conecta con la propia vida, lo encuentro que es realmente, realmente es maravilloso. Es maravilloso. Me preguntaba, y no puedo dejar de decir esto, me preguntaba porque yo tuve un accidente jugando fútbol hace varios años y tengo paralizado una parte importante de mi pie derecho. De hecho, precisamente el dedo gordo del pie derecho no se mueve. Y decía, ¿qué es eso? ¿Cómo mirar esto que que nos estás mostrando? Ya lo voy a ver. Pero quería decir eso. Qué increíble cómo la vida es tan redonda, tan perfecta.
Beautiful. Yeah, I am with you. The incredible gift of being given a wisdom from an ancient tradition with so many practitioners over thousands of years to allow us to get to know our body, but also to get to know our spirit, to get to know our heart, to get to know our emotions. For example, the wood element in which this liver story of going into the future lives has an emotional background. It has an emotional range. And the range when you're going into the future goes from being aggressive and winding up in the energy of anger. I'm going to fight the world. I'm going to go through the world. I'm going all the way to being able to move through the world by taking care, by bringing even kindness, and so this tradition shows us it's not just the body, it's the spirit in which we move, and the image that I showed you of the first of the man standing, and now it's the man or woman, it's a human being, but that when they draw a line on the top of that image, that line on the top is heaven, and then the legs go down to the earth. And in this interpretation, the human being is the creature that connects heaven and earth, where heaven is possibilities, but the earth is where true physical manifestation happens. And that journey, that mission we have to connect heaven and earth is challenging. When you take ideas into reality, it gets messy. And so there's a lot of learning about how do we walk this journey and deal with all of this, the reality of the gift we have to have bodies, and then the challenge that we have bodies. And so thank you for that. Beautiful. Gisela.
Hola. Gracias. Hola a todos. Hola, Bob. La verdad es que me conecté por casualidad hoy día y siento que la charla fue para mí. Así que gracias. Y lo mío tiene que ver con quizás el paso 2 que nombraste de estar en equilibrio. ¿Qué es ese equilibrio? Y lo pongo quizás en mi experiencia personal. Hasta hace poco me sentía en pleno equilibrio, enfocado muy en el trabajo, haciendo lo que yo quería, siendo líder. Y en un momento hubo un quiebre y tiene que ver con mi familia. Sí. Y ese equilibrio que yo pensaba que tenía, no estaba. Y desde ahí, la verdad es que había un desequilibrio. ¿Y por qué más me hace sentido? También estoy con una lesión en la rodilla derecha, en el brazo derecho. O sea, esa línea que marcaste, la energía que fluye hacia arriba, claramente está bloqueada. O sea, y todo tiene conexión. Entonces, me resuena tan fuertemente tu charla. Wow. Y te pregunto, ¿cuál es ese equilibrio?
So here's what I'm learning in with that question, because remember the very first point, the lamb being beaten. And we can say, oh, I'm unbalanced. But balance is being able to create balance even when you're being beaten by life. And how do we do that? Clearly, when our life journey is interrupted and big breakdowns show up, it's like, how do we sustain balance? Remember, the first figure of the human being had the arms. And what do these arms mean? Are your arms out to embrace life, or are your arms like this, pushing life away? And so we need to learn to be big enough to embrace the breakdowns. And this is actually something we found very important for leadership. What does it mean to embrace the breakdown? It means that you don't have to like it, but it means that you take responsibility, that this is now my world. It's part of my world. And I'm not going to get lost in, I don't like it, or a story. I'm not going to get lost that somehow things are not right until we go back to the past. No, I'm going to embrace it. And what am I going to do? What that first point is telling us with the story of the lamb, you can always bring possibilities. You can focus on the beating, or you can focus on what are the possibilities now. Another aspect of embracing it and giving and bringing your power to the moment in the dance with life is to also show we can embrace other people. One of the big breakdowns in our culture today, Gisela, is people have been trained to be solo artists. They don't ask for help. They don't form teams well. We have been educated to be the expert doing things. And then when the we space begins to have problems, then we complain. And so we declare these as leadership edges. And the mood we want to learn is to accept and enter. We need to learn to walk into the fire to create something good, something better. It's not simply suffering, and it's not simply getting back to the way it was. And this is best done when you're in conversation with these questions with someone else, because my learning about the power of conversation is when I have them only with myself, I get bored because I only hear the same thing over and over. So I would recommend have conversations that life is giving me this, but I'm going to design something good out of this. Might be learning, might be a new strategy, might be a new conversation with the family. But this is not simply tranquilization. This is truly owning the power that we have as a human being and exploring what's possible there. Does that resonate for you, my dear? Okay, onward to a good life. Thank you. Edson, my friend. You're still on mute, my friend.
Perfecto. Yo conecté hoy con una experiencia que yo tuve con Wilson Araya, Dr. Wilson Araya en Newfield. Yo hice coaching en salud, anatomía de la alma, de cómo son las interpretaciones, ¿no? Y me emocioné. Yo soy japonés, no soy chino.
Sí.
La kanji, el ideograma japonés, viene de la China, ¿no?
Sí.
Y yo veo muchas interpretaciones filosóficas en los kanjis, los ideogramas. Es una historia fantástica, no es como nosotros tenemos en el excedente una palabra que nos representa muchas cosas, ¿no? Tengo que ver en etimología, todo eso. Yo conecté la palabra cáncer, la historia de cáncer, que son tres
Wow.
palabras que son la enfermedad, una, otra, una montaña y tres bocas, que es gula. Entonces, es una enfermedad de excesos. Entonces, eso es una historia que trae mucha, no es solamente letras, más una sabiduría por atrás, ¿no? Y yo vivo en Brasil,
Yes.
y yo pienso de cuánto los pueblos indígenas tienen su interpretación que nosotros podemos también incorporar en nuestro liderazgo. Yo fico refletiendo eso también, de sabidurías también, no solamente chino, como también de pueblos que no son incluidos tantos hoy, porque pienso que estas culturas están se perdiendo porque hay una novedad, hay toda una superficialidad de hablar de tecnología y todo eso. Entonces, yo me conecté a investigar más esas historias que para mí son, que dan sentidos para lo que nosotros estamos hablando y practicando eso. Eso que me ficou. No sé si yo fui claro, mas yo estoy un poco, no, yo estoy emocionado de estar escuchando eso de un lado de interpretación, de significado, na busca de sentido en la
Sí.
escuta, ¿no? Gracias.
Very good. Thank you, Edson. I appreciate your appreciation of wisdom and your comment about how you see the characters are stories and they are images. And to have a definition that this means that is very different than to have a picture. It shows a world, it shows a worldview. And this is something I think has great wisdom and that we want to bring to our sensibilities as leaders and coaches and for our own lives. And that to appreciate wisdom, this is not a competition of cultures. Every observer opens some possibilities and closes others. And so in our generative tradition, we are not trying to be the culture, we're trying to be the culture about cultures that can draw what is positive for meaning and a good life into our lives, but also into our impact in the world through leadership. So thank you. I'm pleased to be on this journey with you. And so with that, everybody take a deep breath. The breath of life. Sometimes we forget. And so I want to thank you for being present today, for bringing yourself to this conversation. You could have been somewhere else. You chose to be here. And I hope you created value for yourself. And I hope that the observer I'm developing, that you can do your own and bring it to your life and those you serve. And so I'm going to ask Gloria to wrap us up here. I want to thank you all very much. I find these conversations highly valuable, and I look forward to seeing you again down the road. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias a todos y a todas por estar aquí. La próxima semana no se vayan a perder nuestra conversación con Juan Eduardo Lazo sobre la felicidad. Aquí está Juanito, haznos un saludito para que todos sepan que te vamos a ver el próximo miércoles. Nos trae un regalo hermoso sobre la felicidad y cómo hacernos nosotros electores de felicidad. Entonces, a todos y a todas los esperamos la próxima semana, misma hora, mismo canal, y muchísimas gracias por haber estado aquí con nosotros hoy. Nos encanta tenerlos en la casa todo el tiempo. Cuídense mucho y que estén muy bien. Chao. Gracias, Bob.
Bye-bye.
Gracias,
Thank
Beita.
you.